read it. So the idea is to try to see the indications, things like age of the universe, and stuff like that. You go to my website. You have to buy my books. It's free on the website.
Oh, we're bringing you back.
Oh, okay. Don't go to my website. The idea of trying to see the hints of God in this world from aspects of science, not faith, facts. Okay. In fact, in the Rambam, Maimonides, in his youth, said you have to believe in God, and in later years he changed it and said you have to know there's a God. There's enough data out there, not to prove absolutely, but to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there is some tinkering going on with the world that allowed you to get here, starting off with a burst of energy. And Maimonides, in his Guide for the Perplexed, in fact, starts off in his introduction, says, in fact, the fastest and the closest way to discover God in the world is to look at and looking natures. And he writes something on this. If you want to comprehend Madat Elokut, the science of God, then you should study Madat Teva, the science of nature. If you don't understand the science of nature, you know how to run your life. How God runs the world is embedded in how the world is functioning. Moses in the closing chapters of the Torah, in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7, says that the key markers in the world, there are two key markers in the world that will tell you there's a God active in the world. Zechor Yemot Olam, Dino Shinot Dor Dor. Moses breaks the calendar into two parts. Zechor Yemot Olam, it's Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7. Zechor Yemot Olam, remember the days of old. And the Rambam says that those are the Sheshet Megreshit, the 6 days of Genesis, how a burst of energy became alive. And Dino Shinot Dor Dor, look at the flow of social history from generation to generation. And that is Rabbi just told you, that comes in another talk, the second half, how the markers in the social aspects of the world, the flow of social Jews and the position of Jews in the world. But the first part is what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to change the order here. Just what Rabbi just said is interesting. How information is skewed as it's presented. I want to show you two examples in the accepted literature that change the information so you will think evolution has been proven. Because I can guarantee that you take any evolutionist that has anything valuable in his life, or I like to say it, like family or something, you make him put his hand on whatever he holds valuable, and say that thing, whatever is, disappear from the world forever. If I can't prove evolution, he'll always back down, because the fact is there are no data, zero, that show that the mutations that changed the flow of life to move forward are random. That's the key. Are they random or not? Because as Noah Weinberg talked about, said in the Foundation Torah, he said, if you have a debate, the first thing you have to do is define your terms. And we're talking about examples in nature and the physics of the world. So we'll get to evolution, and I talked a bit earlier, but I want to show two examples in the press that skew the information that the average person would say, well, those dummies that don't believe in evolution, here are the data right here. Evolution is a two-stage process. We'll get into it a bit later. Evolution is a two-stage process. The first process is random mutations make changes in the sex line, and those random mutations make the progeny, the offspring, smarter, dumber, faster, slower, stronger, weaker. The key in the first stage of evolution, the two-stage process, is the mutations. And the mutations are random if you're using the word evolution. If you're sloppy and you're using evolution as a meaningless word, then there's no debate, because words have meaning. Random mutations, the emphasis on the word random mutations make changes in the sex line that are going to change the qualities of the progeny. The second half of evolution is 100% not random. It's completely, totally not random. And that's why people say, well, evolution isn't random. Look, it's survival of the fittest, which in itself is a pretty meaningless statement, isn't it? How do you define those who are fit? By those that do what? Survive. Survival of the fittest is a survival of the survivors, is what it says. But the second half of evolution isn't random. Strong lions kill and eat weak lions. The reason there are not a lot of lions in the world is hunters. Lions kill lions. So that's not random. And fast cheetah, baby cheetah that are born with the genes to make them run faster than other cheetah, fast cheetah get more food than slow cheetah, so fast cheetah can feed more of their progeny. So the second half isn't random. That is to say, strong lions beat weak lions and fast cheetah get more food than slow cheetah. That's not random. But the first stage has to be random to use the word evolution. Otherwise, there's another word which is neutral, and it's called development. That life developed from the simple to the complex, I think, is not only true scientifically, it's true biblically. I mean, the Bible, the Torah in Genesis chapter 1 devotes a total of 26 sentences. From 1. I get a little, well, whoever that was, hope you're covered by insurance, I'm not. What was I saying? Something important. The Genesis chapter 1 starts with the creation of the world, and by verse number 26, you've got Adam. I mean, there are 26 sentences of how much information can be given. Creation of the universe. The Torah is like a zoom lens. Day number 1, the universe. Day 3, the earth. Day 6, humans. So there's almost no data. Back at MIT in the Hayden Library, Press had 50,000 books. Not the Bible books. Physics, chemistry, cosmology, thermodynamics, from the creation of the universe down to humanity. The Torah gives us 26 sentences, but on the few sentences, the 6 sentences that are developed, that are devoted for animal evolution, are in fact what the fossil record says also. Animal life starts in the waters, moves to the land, becomes mammalian, becomes human. That's what the Torah says. The fossil record says exactly the same in hundreds of thousands of samples. Life starts in the waters, it's called the Cambrian explosion of life, moves to the land, becomes mammalian, becomes human. So the two systems agree. The question is, what drove that development of life? If you use the word evolution, then it has to be random, and someday, in one of the talks I'm giving, there's going to be a guy or a gal, or who's a lawyer, or if their parents are high-powered lawyers, and it'll go to the federal courts, and evolution will either have to be stricken from the textbooks or be defined. Because it is forbidden in public schools of the United States of America that get federal funding to teach theology in science classes. And evolution, the word evolution is a theological statement. And if any of you guys out there have parents that are high-powered lawyers, you should go to the courts and they'll win. Because evolution is a theological statement. It says God is not active. Evolution is not a neutral word. It says God is not active, the mutations are random. And that's a theological statement. And so it should be banned from the science classes. The word development is neutral. That life developed from the simple of the complex. The Torah said it 3,000 years ago. Science says it for about the last 200 years. Life developed, but the word development is neutral. It says the mutations happened, but what drove them? Was it God? Was it random? Or was it a mix of both? It doesn't take a stand on that. And that's kosher to teach in the science classes. Because it says neither yes God or no God. But the word evolution says no God. That's the meaning of the word random mutations. No tinkering, random mutation. So it's important to see the difference. But I want to show first, which is not what I planned to do, but when Barbados said I'd given the information, 2 examples of how information is skewed. So the average guy in the block who's not into biology will say, oh boy, those dummies that told me this stuff back in Jerusalem, why they don't know what they're talking about. So here are, we're hiding, just getting figures. I'm back. 2 examples. 2 examples of evolution. Statements in French. One is called the humanity switch. The humanity switch is very interesting. It's in a scientific journal called The New Scientist, not peer-reviewed, but highly respected, not as widely read as Scientific American, but a very big, large statement for the scientific community. Scientific American has a similar article also, but this is the one a colleague of mine from China sent me. So what the humanity switch actually is about the humanity switch, it shows the development of the shape of the skulls from a chimp-type skull finally to a human-type skull. I don't know if you can see the difference here, not with your high forehead. This is the huge high forehead, the part that we have here for our logic. So that's the flow. And it is, in fact, a true statement, because the shape of your head is your humanity switch. Not your neshama, but how you think, because in all the experience we have, that the shape of the skull maps very closely the shape of the brain inside the skull. So what are they telling us here? Well, they're telling us, so they're telling us the following. They're not telling us this, but I'll tell us this. Okay? This is a line showing increasing complexity. Here we have people with the human-type skull. Back here, there's a gene. The gene already exists. It goes way back in time. And at this point here, about 5 million years ago, not at the Asian University, there was that lots of the other times. 5 million years ago, something happens, a mutation happens, and a common ancestor that we have, this line breaks off, and it goes to the chimps. And that matches that gene, looking at passenger pages, maps it, and also the phenomena that are taking place, the atrophy and lift, etc., all taking place about this time. So that's the beginning of the common ancestor. Now something very strange happens now, which is rare but not unknown. This gene that already exists, notice the gene is already there, duplicates itself. Interesting. So now you've got twice that stuff going, and another common ancestor goes off. It's too complicated. It's okay. And then, what? So he knows, can you say it? I can't pronounce it. You got it. And then, the same gene duplicates itself again, and you get people through lectures. Notice that the information is already there in the system, waiting to occur, and then it duplicates itself, and it duplicates. Then you have 4 copies of the same. There's a slight modification, like a photograph of a photograph of a photograph. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. It's easier to get it. Now that's very rare. This is rare, but this plus this is really rare, and you end up with having life, human life. Not human life, but people, not necessarily the neshama yet. Okay, but at least beings that are our intelligence and our shape. So that's what the article says, okay? And it is true, the humanity switch, because everything that you experience takes place in your head. Everything. Your entire world is from here to here. For instance, I've never seen me wearing sandals, but I can see enough sneakers. Everyone, please wiggle their toes. Feel your toes wiggling? Where? Where do you feel your toes wiggling? No, feet don't feel a thing. Feet don't feel a thing. It's all in your head. It's hard to believe, but you're feeling your toes in your head. The sad fact is a person that loses a limb still feels the limb. Right, it's called the phantom limb until the brain takes over that spot. In the brain for other uses. The simple fact is your entire world, is from here to here. There's no light up there. There's no light out there. The only light you have is what you perceive in here. There's electromagnetic radiation. But it's not light. Light is in here. Otherwise the air would be glowing. And the air isn't glowing. It's only glowing when radiation hits your eye and then it converts. And what's interesting is the chemistry is very well known of how the phenomenon takes place. But there's no light in your brain. There's no sight in your brain. There's no sound out here. In fact, it is true, when a tree falls in a deserted forest, does it make a crash? No. Crashes take place in your head. Molecules of air move, but only when it hits your auditory system that converts it into electric signals do you perceive sound, but there's no sound in your brain, except gurgle, gurgle, gurgle as the blood goes through your veins. Hopefully they're not too clogged yet. And so that's, where it is at all. I mean, you begin to wonder whether there's anything out there, because there's no sight in your brain, there's no sound in your brain, but some here, you're hearing sight and sound. So it might actually be, and again, this but your mind perhaps is separate from you. In any event, so in fact it is indeed the humanity switch that shows the change from back here, chip like this, and then this, that gets you to have a head that is human. And that's what the article says. And here's the summary, word for word, of the article, so that the average person who doesn't have time to read the article can just read the summary. Why not? Who wants to waste the time reading all this stuff about this, that, this gene and that gene and how many amino acids?
Is that of insurance?
Now, next time you think about that, remember this. Now, was there sound or wasn't there sound? I had to demonstrate. You put that play up. Sure. All that sound was right in here.
Right.
All the sound out here. So here is the summary of this article that shows duplication, duplication, and end of the head by pure type head. Here's the summary and see how it's skewed. Those are the data that are presented. Okay? That's all that's presented in the article. Here's the summary. The essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of random mutations, every one of them happening by chance. Again, the essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of random mutations, every one of them happening by chance. Is that what that says? What doesn't it say? Really? Random mutations happening by chance? There's not a single statement in the entire article about random mutations or happening by chance. The mutations happen. The question is, what's your mutation? And it's highly instructive to remember the information is already present. You don't have to be brought online. So the actual summary of the article is, the essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of mutations. That's what the article says. But the average Schlemiel that reads this and doesn't bother reading the article goes away saying, oh boy, those dummies out there wasting their time. The essence of humanity largely boils down to a bunch of random mutations, every one of them happening by chance. And this is a respected scientific journal. Scientific American says very similar things. There are no data that support that the mutations are random. Zero. None whatsoever. So people sometimes argue, well, if God were really running the show, if God were really running the show, why would there be things like errors? And this is the MIT technology, the technology reviews, the MIT alumni journal. And here's the great God in the sky diagramming. It's probably who mixed them in like this? Is Da Vinci? Or is it Michelangelo? I think it's probably Leonardo Da Vinci.
Yeah.
What are these? And you probably can't see them, but these are mistakes. Is life the product of grand designer? And the question would be, why would there be mistakes? The Torah, see, the average person thinks that if God is running the show, evolution will be a straight line. But there are no data that imply that either in the text of the Bible or in the data from the field. So the information that we have about how life develops is very, very simple, very tiny amount, very, very concentrated in the Torah. Here's another example from the New York Times, International Herald Tribune. It's on page 2 and it's 4 columns wide. Notice it's a big deal because you don't get to page 4 columns wide on the second page if it's not really trying to prove something. And what's the title? Well, it's amazing. Here's another example of these dummies that think about that there's no evolution. Tibetans cited as recent case of evolutionary change. Here is proof positive. Lifetime now. Tibetans cited as recent case of evolutionary change. You don't have to go back to chimpanzees becoming people. They need that, or communists. Forget that. Don't need that. This is right now. And it's an amazing article. And not only that, the original article was in the journal Science. Now, Science, if any of you guys in the sciences, you know that the journal Science is one of the 2 leading peer-reviewed journals in the world. The journal Science is published in the States, and its parallel is called Nature, and it's published in the British Isles. So what happens to get published in Science? You've got to have some really hot stuff going. That's what makes page 2, 4 columns wide. Well, these researchers are just amazed. There are Tibetans living at 14,300 feet, and they're just thriving. I mean, they just run their lives like they're just amazing. Wow. The difficulty is at 14,300 feet elevation, what don't you have a lot of in the air? Oxygen. There's not a lot of air up there. So how do they do it? So these scientists went up to this, they're probably huffing and puffing by the time they get up there, and they took samples from a very large sampling of the population in a village, or these villages, and what they discovered was, wow, 87% of the population have a mutation in the hemoglobin. Not that they have more hemoglobin, the red part of the blood that captures the oxygen, but they have a mutation in the hemoglobin. And it makes it proactive. It almost like grabs the oxygen. So these guys and gals that have this, I mean, they're just thriving. It's 87% abundant. Now, you really don't want that mutation because it kills you. But it kills you after your early childbearing ages. So down at sea level, you wouldn't want it. Well, the good news about this study is the Tibetans really aren't Tibetans. They're Han Chinese. That's one of the reasons that China says you should own Tibet. I mean, it's a political statement, but it's ridiculous. But why? Because between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, a bunch of Han Chinese got tired of living down in the Beijing area, killing mosquitoes, probably. Or maybe, you know, what can you do, fighting whoever. And they said, you know, up there in the mountains, it looks pretty good. Let's go up to the mountains. So now we've got some information. Of course, you realize that's 3,000 years ago, or 4,000. I mean, America wasn't even America then. I mean, you were living in England. It was the Anglos or the Saxons or whoever they were. In any event, so now to get published in the journal Science, you have to do a background study. So the good news is they've got the background study. The Han Chinese in Beijing, which is sea level. Now there are enough passive mutations in this mutation that makes the hemoglobin proactive for oxygen that you can tell that it appeared in the genetic line tens of thousands of years ago. I mean, long before the Han Chinese decided to move up there. So now the Han Chinese down at sea level make a very good background study. So they did a very large sampling of the blood of the Han Chinese at sea level, and they found it was 9% abundant in mutation. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it wasn't 87%. Why 9%? Because at sea level, you don't want it. You know, you'd like to either have your later childbearing ages. So let's go back 3,000 years. Okay? The Han Chinese are living at sea level. Too much, I don't know, crowded, smelly, who knows what. Let's go up to the mountains where the air is pure. So if it's 9% abundant, and 100 families say, let's get out of here and go to the mountains, honey. And so they get out of there and go to the mountains. If it's 9% abundant, how many of the families, of that 100 families, will have the mutation? 9. How many won't? 91. Right, exactly. Now they get up to the mountain, and it becomes a little more racy. So they get up to the mountain, and what do you think it's like at the end of the day, the guys and gals that don't have the mutation? I mean, they're working in the field also. It's like this. Honey, let's make a shot. No. But the guys and the gals that have the mutation, oh, babe, just have as many kids as possibly can. And so gradually over the time, in the last 3,000 years, yeah, that's exactly what happens. That's what happens in the world, okay? Gradually over the next 3,000 years, the 9% becomes 87%. And wait another 1,000 years, it'll be 95%. That's the way it happens. So now let's see the article's title again. Tibetans cited as recent case of evolutionary change. Evolution we defined as random mutations within the system now. Random mutations make some people more adaptive, some, strong. Was this evolution? Did any mutation within the experimental period take place in the last 4,000 years? No. It's not evolution. Zero evolution. Anybody know the proper word?
Development.
What? Here it is. You got something that you have a certain quality, and you change the environment. They did by going up here. And now that new quality, which wasn't so good down there, is very good here. It's called adaptation. It's called adaptation. It's because the quality that's already present is perfectly adapted for this new, but it's not. But there's no evolution. So why would the title from Science say Tibetan cited recent evolutionary change? Because the article in the journal Science, which is peer-reviewed, unlike the New York Times, doesn't say evolution. It's an adaptation. Tibetans showed a case of adaptation. So why would the editor of the New York Times, the International Herald Tribune, change adaptation to evolution? Well, because evolution sells newspapers. That's why. Adaptation doesn't. I mean, oh boy, improved adaptation? I mean, really, it's not very interesting. But evolution, that's a button. That sells newspapers. And newspapers are in the business of selling newspapers. Because the more copies they sell, the more advertisers will pay to be in their newspaper. That's why, if you guys don't read Hebrew, the number 2 newspaper in Israel at the moment, Israel Hayom, is the second largest selling newspaper in Israel. And you know what? It's not even sold, it's given away. You see these guys and gals in red jumpsuits passing up the newspaper, that's Israel Hayom. It's loaded with advertisements. And evolution brings advertisers, because evolution brings readers. So be careful what you get to read, either in the scientific literature or what your biology teacher will confront you with, because you can't confront them and say, show me that the mutations are random. And there are no data that support the mutations being random. There are huge amounts of data that mutations take place. Obviously, that's what makes some lines stronger than others. And that's what made these changes here. These are changes, the mutations are added to the system, emphasizing this gene. So that takes place. The question always comes back to the absolutely crucial aspect that you have to answer is it random or is it by design? So I want to just move forward now into to start with more in order, but I want to just cover that part with that's it. So we have here, I should have passed these out before. Anyway, there's enough here for like, and I have a slide. This is probably the strongest, like one for every two people in Big
I don't remember how many you made.
So let's make one for every three, because nobody's over sure. Yeah. Just take like one for every three people. Please don't take more than this. It's Genesis chapter 1. It's a slide directly from NASA. If any of you are online now, you can just go to online and type in, you can Google images, WMAP, or go to the NASA site. Go to the NASA site and type in WMAP, the initials. You can look at the same thing here. This is probably the strongest theological statement that science will ever deal with, and exactly, it's the first part of Zechorim Otolam Kino Shirot Dor. Remember the days of old. The 6 days of Genesis that turn an explosion of light into life itself. It's a timeline. And this is directly from the web. It has nothing to do with any theological statement, but it's probably the strongest theological statement that science will ever meet. In this statement right here, science has literally discovered 80%, 75% of the biblical God. Literally. And atheists, and I don't understand like to say, we have a book on the bestsellers, you get to talk to all the big atheists also. And they all, you hear the following as we go through. So what you have here, the black is nothing. Not empty space. Empty space is in here. Vacuum. This is nothing. Torah would say God. A scientist would say, well, we don't deal with nothing. No one can deal with nothing. Humans can't conceive of nothing. You can't extract space and time and matter from your thoughts. You can't. The things humans cannot conceive. No human can conceive an edge with an inside and no outside. Try to conceive of a universe in which there's no space. You can't. You know why? Because you can't abstract thought based on your thoughts. You can write the words down, but you can't picture it. So this, Torah would say this is God, Hamakom, one of the names for God. Science would say we don't deal with that because it has no physical reality. We deal with vacuums and stuff like that in here. This is creation, this is time over, this is the expansion over time. The oval at the end shows the expansion in 3 dimensions, okay? Going down in all directions. We're going to do this on paper. Each line is another billion years, comes up to be just under 14 billion years. The specks are galaxies. What's crucial here, though, is the creation of the universe. Notice, this is not like one of a dozen opinions. This is the condensed knowledge of the scientific community. It hasn't changed one word. Well, actually, that's it changed one number from 13.7 to 13.77. Over, it's not much of a change over the last 10 years, because the original one that I have here is about 10 years old now. It's about 7 or 8 years old. Anyway, if you go online, you can find it yourself. Just type in WMAP, the initials for the satellite. They've got the data. So what's the key here? The key is, first of all, science accepts creation. You realize that if you go back 50 years in the scientific community and look up surveys on the web from the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s, asking questions like the age of the universe, the vast majority of scientists that replied to these surveys were, from the age of the universe, you gotta be kidding. The universe is eternal. Oh, the Bible says in the beginning, because people like to think this kind of stuff. But we know the universe is eternal. The creation of the world. It's only in the late 1960s that Arnold Penzias and Robert Wilson at the Bell Labs discovered the radiation left over from this great burst of energy called the echo of the Big Bang that fills the universe today. They got the Nobel Prize for that discovery. And it's overnight, the understanding of the universe changed. There was a creation, but that's a problem. That's a real problem. What created it? So we have the term the Big Bang, which is a useful term. It was coined by Fred Hoyle. Fred Hoyle was a skeptic who thought the universe was eternal. Later he becomes overwhelmingly convinced of a divine tinkering in the world. But initially, he was of the group that felt the universe was eternal. He was being, the majority held to be eternal. In the 1950s, he was being interviewed on the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and put little zets into the conversation. So the interviewer said, well, Professor Hoyle, what do you think about people who think there was a creation? And he said in derision, do you think it was a Big Bang? And the press picked it up. Since that time, it's been called the Big Bang. But you realize that term was coined in derision. But it's a very useful term because it allows a secular person to talk about the creation without, God forbid, having to talk about creation. Since creation sounds like what? God. So let me just use the term Big Bang. So that's a great, very useful term. The term the Big Bang does not say what made the Big Bang go bang. Make that very clear. The term the Big Bang is only another word of saying creation. But creation has within it the implication of a creator. But what does science say? So those, you can all probably, everyone should be able to see what you've got from the copies that were sent around, or if you have it on the web. You'll notice what the furthest line out is quantum fluctuations. The creation of the world is by a quantum fluctuation. This understanding was first floated by Ed Tryon, and it was in 1973, somewhere I have his exact quote, and he wrote in a recent interview, he wrote the following. It's really pretty extraordinary. In 1973, it occurred to me that a mix of relativity and quantum theory could allow the spontaneous creation of the universe from nothing. If in fact this is the case, then this is phenomenal. Then matter and energy would not be fundamental, but manifestations of the underlying laws. Ultimate reality would be the laws of nature, the mind of Einstein's God. Okay, what we're seeing here from a totally secular approach is that we have something related to the mind of Einstein's God. Well, using quantum fluctuation, let's just call it the laws of nature. Okay, the laws of nature. So there are a few aspects of the laws of nature that are worth considering. First of all, not a rhetorical question. If the laws of nature create the universe from absolute nothing, does that mean the laws of nature predate the universe? Yes, of course, it's obvious. Are the laws of nature physical, or are the laws of nature forces that act on the physical? So they're not physical. If the laws of nature predate the creation of the universe, they predate our understanding of time. Because our understanding of time starts with the creation. So we have now something rather interesting from the scientific community. A force or forces, not physical, outside of time, creates the universe from absolute nothing. Sound familiar? Huh? What does it sound like? Yeah. It is, in fact, 75% of the definition of the Bible of God. Not physical, outside of time, creates the universe from absolute nothing. And you'll notice the only name for God in Genesis chapter 1, the creation chapter, is Elohim, exactly. God is manifest in nature. Is there any indication that God would use the laws of nature, like quantum mechanics and laws of relativity, as Tryon pointed out, and the scientific community accepts? Is there any indication in the Bible that God would use the laws of nature to get things done, like create the universe? Are there any examples in the entire Torah? Well, in Genesis chapter 1, there are no examples because it's just 26 sentences to get to add them. But the rest of the Torah has lots of descriptions about God. Any thoughts where God uses a force in nature to get stuff done? Yeah? Yeah? Well, I know something more explicit. Yeah? What? Create Yamsu. What opens the sea? What? Strongest wind, yeah. Leviticus chapter 14, verse 21. And that wind looked so natural that the text had to say, and God made the strongest wind blow all night. That wind looked totally natural. And the sea splits. In fact, somewhere in my papers, I have actually a copy of an article, I don't think I pulled it out, which discusses the splitting of the sea. And the splitting of the sea turns out to be a possibility that it might actually have happened naturally. Naturally with God tweaking, but we're told. Now how do we know it looked natural? Because after the Israelites go in, who follows them right on in? The Egyptians. Only when the waters are coming back, they say, no, Habibi, God is fighting for the Israelites. That's what they said. Translated into English is oy vey. So we realized that they didn't think it was supernatural, and they had a pretty good cause not to. Here's an article in the world's leading peer-reviewed journal of meteorology. I don't think there's any second-rate stuff to get a point to it. The world's leading peer-reviewed journal of meteorology. You know how winds and waters work together. The Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. Are there oceanographic explanations for the Israelites crossing the Red Sea? And there are. These guys didn't know from Powell. They didn't take a big fan down to the Yam Suf. But they did a computer study, and they found that a wind 40 miles an hour out of the east for 8 hours will open the sea. You turn the wind off, and it comes back like a tidal wave. The exact description is in the Bible. Does it prove there's a God? I don't think so. But it certainly shows the possibility and the idea that God might use the laws of nature, the quantum fluctuation, to create the world is completely in accord with how God runs, how the biblical God runs the world. The question that remains then, which is for later talk, is the second half of what Moses says, drschroeder. What are the data that show God active in the world after God creates the universe? Well, for the 6 days of Genesis, there's a lot going on for that. But the social history comes much more recent when you have humanity further. Because Torah says that there's only one physical creation. Science tells us there's one physical creation. And now we've got a problem. Because if there's one physical creation, it means that light beams become alive. If this is the only physical creation, which is what physics holds by 100%, this is it. And it didn't produce short and chopped liver. It produced simply super energy, electromagnetic radiation by a microsecond downstream. It was super powerful light beams. Einstein told us how energy can condense into matter. It morphs, takes on the form of matter, and then over time, stars and galaxies, and finally the elements of life and life. But to think that the scientific community absolutely holds by the fact that light beams became alive. This is science. This is the condensed knowledge of the scientific community. This is the only physical input. At the end, you have things out here on this line where we are that wonder so much about the universe that they can get together, build a satellite, this WMAP, and plot the history of the universe and get a couple of people the Nobel Prize. Light beams learn to wonder. Light beams learn to feel boredom. Light beams feel love. Where does a light beam have the chutzpah to feel love? But that's what this diagram says, and every scientist holds by it. Any scientist that thinks about the history. That's why when you get into your next evolution class, you'll never start back here at the creation. It'll be always something marginally interesting, like a fish becoming a frog, or a thing becoming a foot. I mean, once you've got DNA going, you can make anything out of anything, because it's like the clay of life. What's really interesting is how light beams became fishes and frogs, and you and me, because that's it. When you look in the mirror in the morning, and for some of us it's pretty depressing, when you look in the mirror in the morning, you are literally seeing the light of creation. Literally the light of creation in your form. The only parallel that I see that matches it is when you drink water, what two elements are you drinking? And how many of you in the room, without joking, how many in the room, the last time you took a drink of water, you said, oh man, you can't beat hydrogen and oxygen, give me some more out. Anyone? No. But when you drink water, you are literally drinking hydrogen and oxygen in a special form. And when you look in the mirror in the morning, with no poetry whatsoever, no guru talk, no new age, whatever it is, you are literally, totally literally, looking at the universe become alive. You're looking at the light of creation in your form, as is the chair also and everything around us. You don't get too uptight. This is really special because everything is made from the light of creation. And that's a difficulty because it's difficult to see, in fact, how that could have happened by random reaction. But that's the understanding that we would have to accept. So how could this happen? Well, it must be that the universe is really a great place to live. And it is. The laws of nature are tuned for life. I mean, just a few simple examples. There are whole books written about this. But one or two simple examples. The universe is expanding, but if you look at the diagrams that were passed around, you notice that at the end, towards the end where the satellite is in our time, the picture is going out like a horn, right? The rate of expansion is actually increasing. Now that's pretty amazing. What's really amazing is there's a force in space. Unfortunately, it's called dark energy, which makes you think you know what it is. A better name is oogly, niggly, and gobbly and doogly, meaningless sounds, because we have no idea what it is. But this dark energy is pushing the universe out, and even avid atheists, who will say, if you want to call what we described before as God, call it God, but it wouldn't be a God that's interested in the world. That's what they would say. Stephen Weinberg, Richard Dawkins, Andrew Lindy, the list goes on and on and on, Brian Carr. That's the God. But the question is, would it be interested in the world? So that one of the laws of nature that make the universe just perfect for life is that force in space, which we have no idea what it is just exactly right to make the universe continue to expand forever. If it were a fraction of a percent stronger, the universe would have flown apart right at the beginning. Planets and galaxies wouldn't have formed. And if it was a fraction of a percent smaller, the universe would have collapsed. So there are two things on that diagram that are called dark. One is called dark energy, and one is called dark matter. Neither do we know what they are. But the dark matter, for those that get interested in how you manage to survive in the world, dark matter, it's pretty, are you trying to lower the heat? It's pretty hot in here. The dark matter is a force that pulls the galaxies together, not one galaxy to another, but within each galaxy it holds its form. And the dark energies make the galaxies move apart. So there are two forces of which we have no idea what they are. One holds the structure of the stars around the center of a galaxy, like the Shvil HaChalav, the Milky Way. But then there's another force that makes the Milky Way move away from the next galaxy out there, and that's the force in space. So the two forces balanced on a knife edge. Does it mean there's a God? It means the universe is tuned for life. But it's the second part of the talk that someone else is going to be giving two talks downstream that will show that you can actually see a marker in the world. All that I can show here is inferences, because the Torah doesn't claim the universe is tuned for life. But the Torah does claim that there will be social markers in the world. And that's what the other talk about. Bino Shiro Gudor. Bino Shiro Gudor, the flow of socialism. The Torah makes that claim explicitly, and Gavron, you hear about it you probably hope it's a short while, if I stop draining around here. So we have this universe in just extraordinary, one other example. One other example of tuning. Now, I just want to draw like a parallel. Supposing you get yourself, I don't know, let's say, my wife and I, like this, my wife's brother, so it's a great writer, we are phenomenal, the human spirit, keeps in post every 2 weeks. Anyway, so Barbara and I like to vacation in Italy, like to step back from the turmoil of every day. And she surprised me one time ago when we rented the car, and out comes an Alfa Romeo. Now, that's a nice surprise. We've been driving like a 10-year-old Toyota back here. So, what was I getting at here? Oh, so I got this nice new Alfa. So let's pretend you own the Alfa Romeo. You drive and you stop at the stoplight. Bingo, a guy crashes into the back. Oh, you bet, of course you should actually use this thing. The back crashes into you. You got your brand new Alfa Romeo. Your wife hasn't even seen it yet. Unfortunately, I once did get a car where the man was taking it home as a surprise to his wife. And I hit it on it, and I crashed into it, passing. I was in my Corvette, and I had to pass him, like because you do stupid stuff in college. So he crashed, then the guy backs up and crashes into it again. Well, now you're furious, so you get out of the car, and you're going to punch this guy right in the nose. And he steps out, he just happens to be 6 feet 8 inches tall, weighs about 380, and you can see he pumps free weights of 400 kilos, with like nothing. So what do you say? Well, why don't you punch him in the nose? Because you realize when you have that size of a mass, he's probably stronger than you. Because we related to that kind of understanding. If you look at the moon and you look at the earth, and you had to say which has the bigger gravity, well, which would have the bigger gravity? The earth. Why? Because it's bigger, because we relate these forces, gravity, strength, we relate these forces to the amount of stuff that's there. But lo and behold, you look at what makes up an atom, atom, a proton and an electron, right? The proton's in the center, the electrons go around it. The mass of the charge on a proton is exactly the change of a charge on an electron, but negative. Exact match. If it weren't an exact match, you wouldn't have light. But the mass of a proton is 1,837 times the mass of an electron. Now that's kind of surprising. Of course you could say, well, why should charge be related to mass? Or why should strength be related to mass? Why should gravity be related to mass? Because you usually assume the more stuff you got there, the more the force is whatever force is being generated. But not with the crucial thing that allows chemistry to form, that allows atoms to form. The universe is tuned on a knife edge. If electrons had the same mass as a proton, there would be no chemistry. Zero. If electrons had 100 of that mass, there would be no electrons. You can change it by, you could probably change it by maybe 0.1%, it wouldn't be a problem. Anything other than that, no chemistry. The universe is tuned for life. Does it prove there's a God? Some people say yes, but there are very strong voices, primarily coming from the secular world, like Scientific American, that say no. Why is it no? Because it's very obvious that the universe is tuned for life. You know why? Because we're in the universe that's tuned for life, but here is Scientific American, not peer-reviewed, the largest scientific journal read by easily a factor of 10, maybe a factor of 100, over the peer-reviewed journals like Science and Nature we were quoting before. Infinite Earths and parallel universes really exist. Infinite Earths and parallel universes really exist. Really? They really exist? Yeah, why do we know that? Well, here are the data. It's in the text, but they give it to you in multicolor printing so you should not miss it. Cosmologists infer the presence of these parallel universes by scrutinizing the properties of our universe. These properties include, and then they list the laws of nature, the protons, the electrons, etc., etc. These properties were established by random processes during the birth of our universe. Yet they have exactly the values that sustain life. That suggests the existence of other universes with other values that don't sustain life. Does it? Does the fact that our universe is tuned for life suggest that there are other universes not tuned for life? I'd like an opinion. Yeah? No. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing as a scientist to read this in a very scientific journal. But what it does tell us is that if we're the only universe, we're designing a universe. And that's what Bernard Carr says. Secular scientist, cosmologist, well known in England. If you don't want God, you better have multiple universes. Not multiple galaxies, universes. Because each universe will have its own set of laws of nature by the random roll of the cosmic dice, and one of them is going to work. And obviously, life is in the one that works. There are no data that support other universes, just like there are no data that support the mutations at random. That's exactly what you should do. Okay. Someone like this here. So there are no data that support that. Make sure you realize when you're being taught these things in school that casually you're told, like the teacher will say, there are no absolute truths, and that's absolutely certain. You got a problem with that, right? Where do you hear it in university? You hear it in university, there are no absolute truths, and that's absolutely certain. So how do we move forward? How do we go into this whole understanding of life? We start with the burst of energy. You see the diagrams are quite passed out, and we end up after. It doesn't really matter whether it's billions of years, 6 days, or a microsecond. The wonder is that it happened. The wonder is that light beings became alive. And that's the evolution that's really important, and if you can call that evolution, you have a better imagination than I have. Because in fact it's so clear there are phenomena that are forcing this in a certain direction. So let's just look now at some of the things in in the flow of life that are extraordinary. First of all, there's a basic problem. That feels good. There's a basic problem in the evolution or development of life. And that is, it has huge leaps. Now, Darwin consistently, in his famous book, his famous book, The Origin of Species, says, Natura non facit saltum. Nature never makes jumps, because you have to have a gradual progression of life, one thing mutating into another. Now, in his time, the fossil record was full of jumps. But he assumed that over time, more fossils would be found, and the difference between this complexity and this complexity of life would be filled in by intermediate stages. What's happened now is this becomes more fixed, and as the fossil record becomes stronger and stronger, we discover there's nothing in here. So nature does make jumps. Again, it's just an indication, not that what it does demonstrate is that we don't understand evolution. I don't think it proves that there's a God, but it certainly proves that we don't understand evolution, and that may in fact require that there is a God. So what does the bad rap that Darwin takes is kind of interesting. So Darwin, and because I want to read now the closing lines of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, how you read about it in the scientific literature, and how you read about it in the Origin of Species. I'm quoting from a very good book, The Science of God, mine. Here is the closing sentences of The Origin of Species, the famous book that got this whole thing going, as quoted in Scientific American, as quoted other publications by Stephen Jay Gould, a magnificent human being who thought the Bible was great literature, but was strictly, Nourishkeit. God forbid that's what he did. He died a few years of cancer. I think you got the story by now. Here is how it is quoted time after time. You see it already. There's a grandeur in this view of life. While this planet has gone on cycling according to the fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, are being and have been evolved. I read it just quickly again. This is Darwin's closing line of The Origin of Species, quoted in Scientific American, Natural History Museum, publication after publication. There's a grandeur in this view of life, while this planet has gone on cycling according to fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been or are being evolved. That's the quote in the public literature and the popular literature that you have. Here's the actual quote, as in the text itself. There's a grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms into one, and that while this planet has gone cycling according to its life and power. Notice what's left out. There's a grandeur in view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms of one. Darwin realized it didn't work by randomness. It's hard to believe that, because the popular image is, how would you get the word truth with a capital C, by the way? How would you get that to happen? Always look at the core literature. Don't believe what you're being told, just by summaries. In 1953, a grad student at the, how much can I keep going because we started late?
Yeah, no, but we booked everything a little bit later. We got another 5-10 minutes.
Okay. In 1953, Stanley Miller, a grad student at the University of Chicago, proved that you could make amino acids by random reactions. He took a glass flask, put certain gases into it, zapped it with sparks, and after a few days, a couple of amino acids formed. Now, amino acids are a big deal because amino acids are what make up proteins, and proteins are what make up people. So you could have been in bongo land, and they bongoed out that Stanley Miller had discovered the origin of life. That was 1953. A year later, George Wald, full professor of biology at Harvard University, about to become a Nobel laureate, is asked by Scientific American to write the article that will show the world that in fact life started by chance, and Wald does that in a classic article that exists somewhere on this file of paper. And tells the world that in fact life started by random reactions, origins of life, George Wald, a year later. Now why did they ask Stanley Mitter to write the article? Because they're trying to tell the people that it's all random. You don't have a graduate student writing the article. No one's going to be the graduate student. You have the guy a big shot who's about to become a Nobel laureate. And Wald writes like this. Time, Jewish name is the same. Time is in fact the hero of the plot. Guess what he's leaving out? The three-letter word. Time is in fact the hero of the plot. The time with which we have to deal is in billions of years. What we regard as impossible on the human experience is meaningless here. Given so much time, the impossible becomes the possible, possible probable, probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles. That's 1954. That article is a landmark article almost till today, with one slight change. 25 years later, in 1979, and the reason I'm going back so far because something happens in 1979 and it changes the origin of life studies. That article, of Wald's article, that life started by random reactions, was reprinted in its entirety, again by Scientific American, with one change in 25 years. The change was, it was retracted. When you retract an article, a person's on the line for getting a Nobel Prize, that's real rare. The retraction is unequivocal. Although stimulating, this article probably represents one of the few times in his professional life when Wald has been wrong. Notice, no equivocation, Wald has been wrong. Can we really wait? Can we examine his main thesis and see, can we really wait for a biological cell by waiting for chance? Can really form a biological cell by waiting for chance combinations of organic compounds? Harold Moore's, in his book, Energy Flow Biology, Morowitz, and Nina's a Jew also, physical chemist, Ellen Princeton, in his book, Energy Flow Biology, computed that merely to create a single bacterium would require more time the universe might ever see if chance combinations were the only driving force. Since 1979, regardless of what your textbooks tell you, you will find no article in the peer-reviewed literature that says life started by chance. None. They no longer pass peer review, and you wouldn't believe that from the popular stuff I was reading for Bohr literature. It doesn't say that then you have to invoke God, but there'll always be something just happened to be present that made the molecules join you. Wow, what luck that was there. It will never work by random reactions. Wald later earns the Nobel Prize for determining something that we just take for granted. Like we take existence for granted. Why is there existence? You want the biggest proof of God? Existence. You know, Marshall McLuhan said it perfectly about taking things for granted. I'm not sure who discovered water, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't the fish. Now, why wouldn't the fish discover water? For the same reason you don't think about being conscious, you don't think about existence, because it's the milieu in which you live. We just take all these things for granted. But the simple fact is, Wald didn't, and he worked with vision. Vision, like how eyes work, and that led to consciousness. And he realized that there's a phenomenon taking place in this world. That doesn't make sense. This is the Wald and he earns his Nobel Prize for determining how I can look over this side of the room and see that guy over there. And I turn my head, I see you, and I don't see him anymore. Which I'm insulted. But you know, I mean, the simple fact is, how does it happen? We just take it for granted. 15, 20 times a second, all this chemistry takes place. Wald earns the Nobel Prize for that. And he realizes that there's something going on here that is not quite the way it seems that it would be random. And he writes the most amazing thing, changing his understanding of the world totally from a godless world to a world that is literally embedded with mind. And he writes it like this. Because what he has to say is in my opinion, an extraordinary retraction of the idea that there's only God. He writes like this. This is my bachelor's at MIT, Caltech's on the West Coast. It's the other MIT. It has occurred to me lately. This is the person that said you don't need God 30 years, 25 years earlier. Then it's always at the quantum level. Because at the quantum level, this is published in the peer-reviewed international journal Quantum Biology, at the quantum level, everything disappears. You realize that, I presume, right? We see molecules, we are solid, stones are solid, but even at the atomic level, the nuclear level, the solidity of a stone is 1 part in a million billion. There's nothing there. The space between the electrons and the electrons and the protons, if you made the nucleus of the atom this big, the electron cloud would be 4 miles away in each direction. That's a ratio about 1 part in a million billion. The first feels solid, stone feels solid. Don't trust your perceptions. And when you get to the quantum level, there's nothing there. It is entirely metaphysical. Believe it or not, and that's exactly what these diagrams show. The universe is created by literally the mind of Einstein's God. Forces, totally ethereal forces. It has occurred to me lately, I must confess with some shock at first to my scientific sensibility, that both the questions of the origin of consciousness in humans and of life that starts from non-living matter might be brought to some degree of congruence. This is the assumption that mind, M-I-N-D, mind, rather than emerging as a late outgrowth of the evolution of life, has always existed as the source and the condition of physical reality. The stuff of the universe is mind stuff. It is mind that has produced the physical universe, and so breeds creatures that can know the science and the arts. In them, the universe begins to know itself. We are literally parts of the universe, looking at the universe. I want to wrap this up now with just one example of the level of complexity that exists in the world at the simplest of level, microbes. Because when you talk about mind being present, or the Torah if we didn't have this poor translation of in the beginning or by the beginning, God sure that we will understand something deep about the meaning. But there's this aspect of mind, of wisdom. Physics says it explicitly. The Torah says it explicitly also. If you get the Greek out of your head, the Greek understanding of the first sentence of the Bible, because we always say Christians are the Greek. Unfortunately, Greek squeezed its way into us also. The text, as Rashi points out, the text never meant in the beginning, by a beginning, with the beginning. Rashi sends us to Proverb number 8. I am wisdom, God made me as the first of God's creation. The text, the proper translation, as Nachmanides points out in the Ramban. So Nachmanides says like this: if you will merit and understand the secret of the first word, Breshit, you will know why the Jerusalem translation, 1900 years ago, is with wisdom God created the heavens and the earth. When Walt says mind, the Torah says wisdom. The simple fact is the universe is the expression of a divine mind. And to show at what level this mind goes, just one example of the level of intelligence that exists at every level in the world. These are microbes. In this liquid, this is a photograph. This is not a drawing through a microscope, 32,000 times expanded. In this liquid, there's a poison called an antibiotic. But you know what happens? This guy's immune to it. He has no problem. But his buddy up here, who's even a different kind of a bacterium, because you notice this one has a different type of cell structure than this one. This guy down here is immune. This one is dying. Now, students at the Hebrew University, I'm pleased to say, discovered what happens next. This is a photograph that was issued in the journal Science. It's taken from the New York Times. This bacterium, with no masking or altering of what happens, this bacterium literally, remember, there's no mind here. It's a microbe. Sends out a call for help. It's totally explicitly that. It doesn't have a voice or a mouth. How does it do it? It does it by its squeak. It's shedding certain specific molecules, which it generates. It sends them out. It doesn't know which way. It just yells, help! Like a person when you help, the voice goes out in all directions. The concentration grade, the steepness of the concentration would be most direct for this one in this direction. This one hears the call for help. How? By picking up these molecules. The molecules are all over. These call for help molecules that the students at Hebrew University discovered. But the concentration the most extreme in this direction. So this one realizes that he's got a buddy up here that's dying. This one, who is immune at great metabolic expense, reproduces the genes and the genetic information that changes the structure, of this one to make it immune, hooks it onto a loop called a plasmid, puts the plasmid on the back of a motor molecule. Your cell has tens of thousands of each of these. Cells wouldn't work. They're actually motor molecules in your cell. The wonder of life, you can't tell until you do microbiology. Hooks them on the back, then grows a tube from here to here. Remember, this is 33,800 times smaller. That's hollow. The motor molecule with the immune vaccination warps through here. Can't go by diffusion, this will be dead earlier. Walks up here, injects it into the nuclear information here, and hallelujah, one more microbe beats vancomycin, what used to be the antibiotics. That's what microbes can do. If you want to see the word, the wisdom of God injected into this world, you don't have to go to outer space so we can see it there also. But the fact is, life is imbued with an intelligence. How you can see this intelligence evolving, it is way beyond the likelihood. There are many, many books published about this. The one I just got to reading is called The Great Evolution Hoax. Stephen Myers has a book on the bestseller list now in New York, The Hidden Face of God. But that also, the fact is, when you look at the data, and you don't have the catechism stuck in your mind that it can all happen by chance, that everything can happen by chance, that random reactions can produce things like a Shakespeare sonnet. The simple fact is, chance doesn't work. Here's the New Yorker magazine, one of the leading literary magazines in the world, showing the monkeys hammering out Shakespeare's sonnet, because Stephen Hawking, in the brief history of time, the most widely sold science book ever written, says getting life out of a universe is a bit like the well-known hordes of monkeys hammering away on typewriters. Much of what they write will be garbage, but very occasionally they will type out one of Shakespeare's sonnets. So Barbara was giving some lectures in England. And she noticed and cut it out from the Times of London. Much ado, but monkeys failed the Shakespeare test. The students at Plymouth University in England convinced the National Arts Council to fork over 2,000 sterling, that's about $3,000, $4,000, to rent a monkey house. Put a computer in the monkey house and see what they'll type out. You know, why not? They can write pieces about that. Anyway, the person in charge, Vicky Melfi, told us exactly what happened. In the beginning, the monkey, but that's like a child. Then the monkeys were frustrated, so they decided to use it as a toilet, which she said was pretty disgusting because every night she had to clean it up. But they noticed when they climbed on it to use a toilet, the keys went click, click, click. And they typed out, after that they just wanted to bang on the keys, which they did for the entire month that you pay them 2,000 sterling for. They didn't type out a single word. But here I've read that the monkeys can type out the Shakespeare sonnet. How do I know that? Because this guy couldn't get it. This monkey's on Prozac. But this one, hallelujah, this one got it. This one got it. Why wouldn't I believe it? I read it in the brief history of time. So be careful to read the brief history of time. They didn't type out a single word. I'll just end it with this. They didn't type out a single word. Really? Monkeys hammering on a typewriter, time and time and again, didn't hammer out a single word. What's the shortest word in English language in English that speaks in the shortest? What? A. Yeah, A. You don't have to make it capitalized. But to make A word, what do you need on each side of it? A space. So my keyboard, if you count it, give you about 100, 110 keys. So it's 100 keys on the keyboard. Forget this back to the space bar is big. What's the likelihood of hitting a space bar? One chance in, if there's 100 keys, one chance in 100. Now what about space bar A? 100 times 100. Space bar A space, 100 cubed, which is what? A million. The likelihood of typing out a single one-letter word randomly is one chance in a million. You never get the Shakespeare sonnet. You know the numbers, it takes the back of an envelope, New York by a factor of 10 to the 690th. You never, ever get a Shakespeare sonnet. But why wouldn't I believe that? And why wouldn't I believe those other things like I showed you in the beginning, that evolution of, Tibetans, etc., etc. Watch out for the press. Put the evolutionists to the corner and say, show me the mutations were random. And they'll say, well, a cosmic ray. So what? First of all, no one has ever seen a cosmic ray, let alone a cosmic ray hitting, a general. They will never be able to tell you the mutations were random. In that case, the word evolution doesn't exist. The word is development. And you don't have to be embarrassed to say that to your teachers, because that's the reality. There are no data that support random mutations. It doesn't prove there's a God, but be careful of how you presented the information, because you can skew information any which way. Try to skew it in a way that makes more sense.